If you had to recommend ketones, like if you had to prescribe it to somebody almost,
Mm-hmm.
like what kind of protocol would you recommend? Because clearly, like it sounds like you're actually using them in your training. You see benefits with it. You believe in the science on the ester side of things.
Yeah. I guess if I had to like say like what my if I were to hazard a guess, as they say, I would say like I think we're gonna learn that these do something, and it's just gonna be like what is it, and what's the actual protocol that's gonna yield the best results on average, and then you can kind of like specify individually from there. So yeah, if someone said like, hey, I'm interested in trying out exogenous ketones, I want to kind of like figure out how to implement those into my protocol, what should I do? I would tell them first we would do what we were talking about before. It's like, let's make sure you're checking all the main boxes. And if they're not, I would just say, hey, do this. If you're really curious about it, some people are just curious and they want to try things out and see what happens and
I'm
test this.
definitely curious now too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's people like that where it's like that's kind of their hobby is testing things out like this, and it's like, who am I to say like you should like people go to casinos and gamble money as a hobby. It's like if they want to spend money on exogenous ketones and see if they work or not on them and their stuff, it's like, cool. So what I would say, like what I would do to try to like maximize the value of that would be, if you're not dialed in your other areas, I would say you're dialed in, like just following you. Like, I mean, everyone can make improvements somewhere, but for the most part, you're not just not like big glaring holes. It's
Right.
for you, it's probably more like, all right, now, because you do so many different things, it's probably more about like, how do I kind of structure things to match this versus the other thing I was doing before,
Right.
versus like you need an overhaul in your nutrition, or you need to like just like completely revamp your sleep hygiene and stuff like that, or your recovery protocol. You probably are pretty like aware of like when you shouldn't go out and hammer through another workout and take a day off and that sort of thing. So in that situation, like if they didn't have that, I would say give yourself like, make that your reward. Like you clean up that stuff, that's your opportunity to start getting curious about this. So then they have like an incentive, and then you get there. Then I would say like, assuming that at this point they don't have the continuous ketone monitors, I think when those come out, that's going to be the easy thing. I shouldn't say easy, but it's going to be the better route to go, to be able to actually have that feedback, not including the finger
Yeah.
prick, and then you can actually check it while you're running without having to stop and do all that. But since that's not available to the public yet, to my knowledge, then get yourself like a ketone monitor with like the little ketone strips.
What do those cost?
That's a good question. There's a bunch of brands that make them. I think one's called like Precision, one's called Keto Mojo, or kind of the main ones. I think they're not cheap necessarily. I think actually the monitors might not be that expensive anymore. I think they're probably like $50-$60 maybe, something like that. I could be off on that, but if you just Google like Keto Mojo or ketone monitors, look them up on Amazon. There's probably cheaper ones and more expensive ones, depending on if you wanted to also read like blood glucose and things like that. But the things that are like maybe a little more expensive that you want to be aware of is the strips. I think the strips can cost like anywhere. They can cost up to $1 per strip. I think there's cheaper versions of them now that you can get. But if you're checking your ketones 3 times a day, like every day
Right.
for a year, that's an expense too. So, but with that sort of thing, I usually find like if you have a lifestyle in place, check the points that you're interested in, and then just assume unless you're changing something drastically, it's going to probably be similar, and then you kind of have that documented. So get one of those, check where your baseline levels are at, check what you like, do the finger prick test, take the exogenous ketone, test 30 minutes after that to see where that pushes you up into. And then that's going to be kind of like your initial phase of like, all right, I need this much, or if I take this much, it lands me in this zone, and that's the zone I want to be. So then you kind of have like most of the work done. You have like the kind of the startup stuff of like, what do I need to actually get into the ranges that would be potentially positive. And then I guess after that, you would want to test like during a longer session. So this may depend on what you're doing. If someone's like training for something where they're never running more than 3 hours, then, or I guess I shouldn't say 3 hours, that's just specific to me, but like beyond say an hour and a half, then you'd maybe want to check at that interval and just see where you're at. And if you're dipping below, try to come up with like a protocol as to like how much do you need to sort of push you back up into it. So from there, I would suggest maybe working with like half servings or less versus full servings. and then kind of have that repetition based on those half servings from there to what you're going to need to continue to stay in that range. That would be for like the intra workout stuff. If someone's like, hey, I'm just curious in trying exogenous ketones and I want to have like outside of, let's say they're going after like, I want the potential recovery benefits from this. What should I do with those? That's actually probably easier. They could probably just, I would still test to see because I'd be curious about like where are they shooting me up into. But for something like that, I would just go with the esters because they're going to give you the biggest dosage hit. And I would say like after a big training session, take one and then take one before you go to bed at night if you're going to do a second one.
Dang, you've got me really curious about this stuff now. Because at first I thought that maybe I was being kind of cynical, but I thought the like Ketone IQ thing was just a gimmick of like marketing and all these influencers, and maybe that specific type of ketone could still be, it's still up in the air, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the diols, I don't think we should, because it's the easy thing to do is think like, okay, the diols are trash or the diols are like the best thing ever. So you look at like Ketone IQ's marketing, you think it's the best thing ever.
Right.
You look at like the research, you're like, well, maybe not so much. But I mean, you want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, even with like an aggressive marketing strategy. So I would say like with the diols, we'll probably continue to learn stuff about them. Like I'm not like convinced that they're worthless by any stretch of imagination. I just think like if you're looking to go into a race and get a performance advantage in the race itself from taking in a diol, you're going to probably have a harder time unless you end up getting like some sort of like mental clarity type of benefit from it. So it's just going to take more of it, and you're going to run the risk of the diol having kind of that more like euphoric type of potential like experience coming along with it.
Right.
So I mean, you can test that stuff though. Like, just like I did, essentially, if someone wants to try it, they could try it in a workout and see how they feel, if they notice anything or not. Just like I would be mindful of placebo effects with any of this.
It's powerful.
It is. Yeah. I mean, some of the research would suggest it can be up to like a 30%, like the placebo effect can be like really, really potent. So, yeah, you do what I find, like if I'm doing something and it's sort of matching what some of the research said, it's probably more likely that it's happening. And then if it like sustains itself, meaning like I tried it the first time and I'm excited about it and I feel like I got a benefit, that's probably just as likely a placebo effect as it is the product working. But if I'm like continually doing it after like kind of that newness has worn off and I'm still getting that same experience, then there's maybe some application there that it's working. But yeah, so I mean, like, yeah, I think the diols are maybe something that would be just like, I would consider, like, I would love to see some research on what is the diol doing for like work productivity or something like that. Because there's tons of applications for this. It doesn't have to be like an endurance race, or potential applications, I should say. But
yeah, and they're so expensive. I mean, it sounds like depending on your lifestyle and your diet already, like you're gonna have to take probably multiple of them, at least the Ketone IQs, to actually get the benefits, to get above that 1.0 to get to the mental benefits. Yeah. So then it also comes down to like, okay, how much are you willing to pay?
Right. Yeah.
For that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that's my hope, assuming this stuff continues to have some sort of application that's positive for people, is that like over time prices will drive down as more stuff comes out, and the market takes care of that usually, to the degree where now we're not spending quite as much on this sort of stuff. I don't even know what Ketone IQ's shot is, but like I know it's cheaper, but I
think it's like $5.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. So then I guess if we look at that, if we look at the Delta G's like N of 2 thing that they did on their Instagram, if you're looking at 3 Ketone IQs, you're looking at $15. So it's still cheaper. But yeah, you are getting a lower return on your blood ketones, at least with those 2 individuals. I'd be curious. I mean, with that sort of thing, it's essentially kind of like an at-home N of 2 case study type of thing, non-written up. But like, I'd be curious if someone else tried it and just see what kind of individual variance. It's cool that they had 2 people, so that it was kind of it wasn't just like, oh, this is one like freak of nature who just happens to test wildly different for one reason or the other. But I would be curious what other people are getting, because maybe some people are responding to the diols differently.